The skeletal framework of our narrative now laid bare, it's time to breathe life into the setting, to paint a vivid picture of the stage upon which this extraordinary event unfolds. Imagine, if you will, the heart of London, a place where history whispers from every cobblestone and the air hums with the energy of millions. Specifically, picture the area around Buckingham Palace, perhaps near the Victoria Memorial, where the gilded gates gleam under the London sun, or, more realistically, peek out from behind a veil of mist. This isn't just any location. It's a nexus of British identity, a place steeped in tradition and ceremony. Tourists from every corner of the globe jostle for the perfect photograph, their cameras clicking incessantly as they attempt to capture a piece of the iconic scenery. Red double-decker buses rumble past, their routes a familiar soundtrack to the city's pulse. Black cabs weave through the throng, their drivers masters of navigating the labyrinthine streets. But, amidst this modern hustle, the echoes of the past remain strong. The architecture is imposing, a testament to a bygone era of empire and grandeur. The royal parks offer a serene respite from the urban frenzy, their manicured lawns and ancient trees providing a tranquil oasis. And, of course, there are the royal guards, those stoic figures in their scarlet tunics and bearskin hats, standing as silent sentinels of tradition. These guards are more than just tourist attractions. They are symbols of unwavering discipline and dedication. They represent a heritage stretching back centuries, a commitment to duty that is both admired and, perhaps, slightly intimidating. Their presence is a constant reminder of the weight of history, a tangible link to the monarchy and the enduring traditions of the British state. The atmosphere here is usually one of polite curiosity and respectful observation. Tourists whisper their questions, careful not to disturb the guards or disrupt the solemnity of the occasion. Children gaze in wide-eyed wonder, imagining themselves as knights and princesses in a fairy tale kingdom. Even the locals, accustomed to the sight, still feel a sense of pride in their city's heritage. However, this carefully cultivated atmosphere is also fragile. IT relies on a shared understanding of decorum and respect. IT requires a certain level of self-awareness and consideration for others. And it is precisely this delicate balance that is about to be shattered by the arrival of our first key player, a man whose sense of entitlement knows no bounds, and who is about to inadvertently trigger an event that will reverberate through the crowd and beyond. The stage is set, the players are entering, and the drama is about to begin. The usual vibrant atmosphere is about to be disrupted. The ever-present royal guards are about to be involved in something truly extraordinary, and the lives of several individuals are about to be irrevocably changed. Having established the vibrant, yet fragile, ecosystem surrounding Buckingham Palace, it's time to introduce the key players who will collide within it, sparking the extraordinary event at the heart of our story. First, let's consider Richard Harding, our wealthy 50-year-old man. Richard is a man accustomed to getting his way. He's built a successful career in finance, clawing his way to the top with a ruthlessness that masked itself as ambition. His tailored suits, expensive watch, and perpetually furrowed brow speak of a man constantly striving, constantly demanding, constantly feeling the need to assert his dominance. He views the world as a series of obstacles to be overcome, and people as either assets or liabilities. Richard's wealth has insulated him from the everyday realities faced by most. He breezes through life in a bubble of privilege, rarely encountering inconvenience or opposition. When he does, his reaction is often disproportionate, a simmering frustration that quickly boils over into anger. He believes his time is more valuable than others, his needs more pressing, his desires more important. This sense of entitlement is not necessarily malicious, but it is deeply ingrained, a product of years of unchecked privilege. He's the kind of man who expects doors to be held open for him, lines to be skipped, and problems to magically disappear. Now, let's turn our attention to young Thomas, a bright-eyed boy of 10, confined to a wheelchair due to a rare genetic condition. Thomas possesses a spirit that shines despite his physical limitations. He's an avid reader, a keen observer of the world around him, and a master of witty comebacks. This trip to London is a dream come true, a chance to see the sights he's only read about in books. He is accompanied by his mother, Sarah, a woman whose love and dedication are boundless. Sarah has scrimped and saved for years to make this trip possible, wanting to give Thomas an unforgettable experience. For Thomas, Buckingham Palace represents the pinnacle of British history and pageantry. He is fascinated by the stories of kings and queens, knights and castles, and he's eager to witness the changing of the guard, a spectacle he's anticipated for months. Finally, we have Guardsman Samuel Baker. Samuel is the epitome of the royal guard. Tall, immaculately presented, and seemingly devoid of emotion, beneath the bearskin hat and the starched tunic lies a man of quiet intelligence and deep-seated integrity. Years of rigorous training have instilled in him an unwavering sense of duty and discipline. He has learned to suppress his emotions, to maintain a stoic facade in the face of constant scrutiny. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior lies a keen sense of observation and a strong moral compass. He has witnessed countless interactions between tourists and the public, and he has developed a sharp understanding of human nature. He is a silent guardian, a watchful protector, and he is about to be tested in ways he never imagined. The collision of these three individuals, each with their own distinct backgrounds and perspectives, is about to ignite the spark that will shatter the carefully maintained equilibrium of the scene. With the stage set and the players introduced, we arrive at the pivotal moment. The inciting incident that throws everything into disarray. Richard Harding, late for a meeting with a potential investor, was already in a foul mood. His carefully planned schedule had been disrupted by traffic, a spilled coffee, and a series of frustrating phone calls. He was striding purposefully through the crowd, his eyes fixed on some distant point, his mind racing with financial calculations and power plays. He saw the throng of tourists as an impediment, a slow-moving obstacle course to be navigated with impatience and disdain. Thomas, meanwhile, was positioned near the barriers, eagerly awaiting the changing of the guard. His mother, Sarah, stood beside him, pointing out the different regiments and explaining the historical significance of the ceremony. Thomas's wheelchair, while providing him with mobility, also presented a physical barrier in the crowded space. Unbeknownst to him, his wheelchair partially obstructed Richard Harding's direct path. Richard, lost in his own world, didn't see Thomas until the last moment. He rounded a corner sharply, his briefcase swinging, and nearly collided with the wheelchair. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his voice sharp and accusatory. Sarah, startled by the sudden outburst, instinctively reached out to steady Thomas's wheelchair. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "We didn't see you." Richard, however, was beyond apologies. His already frayed temper snapped. "Sorry isn't good enough," he barked, his face reddening with anger. "You're blocking the entire path. Some people have important places to be." He gestured dismissively at Thomas's wheelchair. "Can't you control that thing?" The volume of his voice escalated, drawing the attention of nearby onlookers. Thomas, initially excited about the prospect of seeing the guards, was now shrinking back in his seat, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. He didn't understand why this man was so angry. He hadn't done anything wrong. Sarah, her protective instincts kicking in, stepped in front of Thomas, shielding him from Richard's tirade. "Please, sir," she pleaded. "There's no need to be so rude. We'll move out of the way." But Richard was not to be reasoned with, fueled by his sense of entitlement and the pent-up frustrations of his day. He continued his verbal assault. "Rude? Rude as blocking a public thoroughfare with that contraption." His voice dripped with disdain. "You people think you can just do whatever you want." He punctuated his words with a dismissive wave of his hand, further humiliating Thomas and Sarah. It was at this precise moment, as Richard's voice reached a crescendo of anger and Thomas's eyes filled with tears, that Guardsman Samuel Baker took notice. The carefully maintained facade of Buckingham Palace and the fragile peace of the crowd teetered on the brink of collapse. The stage was set for an intervention, an unexpected deviation from protocol that would transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. As Richard's outburst intensified, the surrounding crowd began to react. Initially, there was a ripple of discomfort, a collective intake of breath as people realized the severity of the situation. Murmurs of disapproval started to circulate, hushed whispers of shameful and disgusting rippling through the onlookers. Many averted their gaze, unwilling to directly witness the unfolding humiliation. Others, however, were drawn in by the sheer audacity of Richard's behavior, their curiosity outweighing their discomfort. A young couple, holding hands and enjoying their vacation. Exchanged worried glances, the woman subtly shook her head, her expression conveying a mixture of pity for Thomas and disgust for Richard. The man, slightly more assertive, took a step forward, as if contemplating intervention, but hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. That he glanced at Richard's expensive suit and imposing demeanor, and a flicker of apprehension crossed his face. An elderly woman, leaning heavily on a walking stick, frowned deeply. She had witnessed countless acts of kindness and compassion in her long life, and Richard's behavior struck her as particularly egregious. She muttered under her breath, "The world's gone mad." Her voice barely audible above the din of the city, she wanted to speak out, to defend Thomas and Sarah, but her age and frailty held her back. A group of teenagers, more accustomed to confrontation and less inhibited by social niceties, exchanged knowing glances. One of them, a young man with a rebellious streak, started to raise his voice, preparing to challenge Richard's behavior. However, his friends quickly pulled him back, cautioning him against getting involved. "It's not worth it," one of them whispered. "He's probably got connections." Despite the growing disapproval, no one directly intervened. There was a palpable sense of hesitation, a reluctance to confront Richard and risk becoming the target of his anger. People were intimidated by his wealth, his confidence, and his apparent lack of empathy. They feared the potential consequences of getting involved, the possibility of being drawn into a messy and unpleasant confrontation. The crowd's inaction, however, only emboldened Richard further. He seemed to feed off the attention. His sense of self-importance growing with each passing moment, he reveled in the power he held over Thomas and Sarah, the ability to publicly humiliate them without facing any immediate repercussions. The silence of the crowd was, in effect, a form of complicity, allowing Richard's behavior to continue unchecked. This collective hesitation served to heighten the tension, creating a palpable sense of injustice that hung heavy in the air. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark, and that spark was about to be ignited by the unexpected actions of a silent observer in a scarlet tunic. The air crackled with tension, the weight of Richard's words hanging heavy in the silence that followed the crowd's muted disapproval. Then, it happened. Guardsman Samuel Baker, who had been standing rigidly at his post just a few feet away, moved. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but it was undeniably a departure from protocol. He didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't even raise his voice. He simply stepped forward. The precision of his movement was remarkable. Years of training had honed his reflexes and instilled in him an unwavering sense of discipline. Each step was deliberate, each movement perfectly controlled. It was as if he were a machine, programmed to execute a specific task with unwavering accuracy. But beneath the mechanical precision, there was a palpable sense of purpose, a quiet determination that radiated from his very being. He moved with a speed that belied his imposing stature. One moment he was a statue, a silent sentinel of tradition. The next, he was a force in motion, an embodiment of authority and protection. He didn't break into a run, didn't flail his arms, didn't do anything that would compromise his dignity or betray his training. He simply moved, smoothly and efficiently, closing the distance between himself and the unfolding drama. The crowd gasped, their attention immediately drawn to the unexpected movement. The murmurs of disapproval ceased, replaced by a stunned silence. All eyes were now fixed on Guardsman Baker, their faces a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and anticipation. They knew that something extraordinary was about to happen, that the rigid rules of protocol were about to be broken. He positioned himself directly between Richard Harding and Thomas, effectively creating a human shield. He stood tall and unyielding, his back to Thomas, his face turned towards Richard. His presence was imposing, his uniform a symbol of authority and unwavering resolve. He was a barrier, both physical and symbolic, standing between the bully and his victim. The act itself was a clear violation of protocol. Royal Guards are instructed to maintain their positions, to remain silent and impassive, to serve as symbols of tradition and authority rather than active participants in civilian affairs. They are not police officers, not social workers, not mediators. Their role is to stand guard, to protect the monarchy, and to uphold the traditions of the British state. But in that moment, Guardsman Baker made a choice. He chose to break the rules, to defy expectations, to act according to his own sense of right and wrong. He chose to stand up for a vulnerable child and his mother, to challenge the arrogance and entitlement of a wealthy bully, and to restore a sense of justice and order to the scene. His action was a testament to his character, a reflection of his deeply held values, and a powerful reminder that even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity. The stage was now set for the chilling glare, the silent weapon that would finally silence Richard Harding and send the crowd into stunned silence, with Guardsman Baker now standing between Richard and Thomas. The stage was set for the final act. The chilling glare, Richard, momentarily stunned by the guard's unexpected intervention, sputtered, "What do you think you're doing?" "I have important business to attend to." He puffed out his chest, attempting to reassert his dominance, but the guard remained unmoved, an impassable wall of scarlet and bearskin. Then, it happened. Guardsman Baker slowly, deliberately, lowered his head, just a fraction of an inch. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to shift the angle of his bearskin hat, revealing his eyes, and those eyes, they were like chips of ice, radiating an intensity that seemed to pierce through Richard's bluster and strike directly at his core. It wasn't anger that Richard saw in those eyes, but something far more unsettling. Disappointment. A profound, almost world-weary disappointment that spoke of countless encounters with arrogance, entitlement, and injustice. It was the gaze of a man who had seen the worst of humanity, and who was deeply saddened by what he saw. The power of the glare wasn't in its volume, but in its silence. It was a non-verbal condemnation, a silent judgment that cut through Richard's carefully constructed facade and exposed the emptiness beneath. It was a glare that spoke of centuries of tradition, of unwavering duty, of a profound respect for human dignity. It was also a glare that conveyed a clear and unmistakable warning. It said, without uttering a single word, "This behavior is unacceptable. It will not be tolerated. Desist immediately." It was a promise of consequences, not necessarily physical, but certainly social and perhaps even legal. The effect on Richard was immediate and profound. His bluster deflated like a punctured balloon. His face, which had been flushed with anger, paled visibly. He stammered, I didn't mean." But the words trailed off, lost in the face of the guard's unwavering gaze. He suddenly became acutely aware of the crowd around him, of the judging eyes that were now fixed on him. He realized that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. He had underestimated the power of tradition, the unwavering resolve of the Royal Guard, and the collective sense of decency that still existed in the heart of London. The chilling glare wasn't just a look. It was a force. It was a force that silenced the bully, that protected the vulnerable, and that restored a sense of order and justice to the scene. It was a moment of profound significance, a reminder that even in the face of arrogance and entitlement, there is still power in silence, in dignity, and in the unwavering commitment to doing what is right. The crowd, witnessing this silent exchange, was left in stunned silence, their breath held captive by the sheer power of the moment. The drama had reached its climax, and the repercussions were about to unfold. The silence, thick and heavy, pressed down on Richard. He felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare by the intensity of Guardsman Baker's gaze. The carefully constructed image of a successful, powerful man crumbled before his eyes, revealing the insecure and ultimately insignificant individual beneath. He stammered again, a pathetic attempt to salvage the situation. I apologized. I didn't realize." His apology, however, rang hollow, lacking sincerity and genuine remorse. It was the apology of a man caught red-handed. More concerned with saving face than with acknowledging the harm he had caused. It was an apology born of fear, not of empathy. Guardsman Baker, however, remained unmoved. He didn't acknowledge Richard's apology, didn't offer a word of forgiveness, didn't even blink. He simply maintained his unwavering gaze, holding Richard accountable for his actions. The silence spoke volumes, conveying a message that no words could have possibly captured. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Guardsman Baker slowly, deliberately, turned his head, breaking eye contact with Richard. He turned his attention to Thomas and Sarah, his expression softening slightly. A subtle gesture of reassurance. He didn't speak to them, didn't offer words of comfort, but his presence alone was enough to convey a sense of protection and support. "Richard, released from the guard's intense gaze, took a step back. As if recoiling from a physical blow, he felt a wave of shame wash over him, a deep and unsettling realization of the gravity of his actions, that he had allowed his anger and entitlement to get the better of him, and he had publicly humiliated a vulnerable child and his mother. He glanced at the crowd, expecting to see faces filled with judgment and condemnation. Instead, he saw a mixture of pity, disgust, and a strange kind of respect. They had witnessed his downfall, his public shaming, and they were now looking at him with a mixture of emotions that he couldn't quite decipher. He lowered his head, unable to meet their gaze, that he felt a deep sense of isolation, a profound realization that he was alone in his shame. His wealth, his power, his success, none of it mattered in that moment. He was simply a man who had acted badly, and he was now facing the consequences of his actions without another word. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He disappeared into the crowd, swallowed up by the anonymity of the city. He left behind him a scene transformed, a crowd united in their disapproval of his behavior, and a royal guard who had broken protocol to stand up for what was right. The aftermath of the chilling glare was about to unfold, revealing the lasting impact of this extraordinary event. With Richard gone, the immediate tension dissipated, replaced by a palpable sense of relief and a burgeoning wave of support for Thomas and Sarah. The stunned silence that had gripped the crowd began to break, replaced by murmurs of conversation, hushed whispers of admiration for the guard, and expressions of sympathy for the boy in the wheelchair. The young couple who had hesitated to intervene earlier now approached Sarah, offering words of comfort and support. "We were so sorry to see what happened," the woman said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "That man was completely out of line." The man added, "Don't let him ruin your trip. London is a wonderful city, and there are plenty of kind people here." The elderly woman with the walking stick, emboldened by the guard's actions, shuffled forward and patted Thomas gently on the arm. "Don't you pay him any mind, dear," she said, her voice raspy but kind. "Some people just don't know how to behave. You just enjoy your visit." The teenagers, now less inhibited, approached Thomas with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "That was intense, man," one of them said. "That guard totally shut him down." Another added, "Yeah, that was epic. You should have seen the look on his face." They offered Thomas a high five, a gesture of solidarity and respect. Sarah, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, could only offer a weak smile and a few words of gratitude. "Thank you all so much," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It means a lot to us." Thomas, who had been silent and withdrawn throughout the ordeal, began to show signs of recovery. The fear in his eyes gradually subsided, replaced by a glimmer of hope and a flicker of his characteristic wit. He looked up at his mother, his expression conveying a mixture of relief and gratitude. Guardsman Baker, having restored a sense of order and justice, remained at his post, seemingly unaffected by the events that had just transpired. He resumed his rigid stance, his face impassive, his eyes fixed on some distant point. He was once again a statue, a silent sentinel of tradition. However, beneath the stoic facade, a subtle change had occurred. There was a quiet sense of satisfaction in his demeanor, a subtle hint of pride in having done the right thing. He had broken protocol, he had risked his career, but he had stood up for what he believed in, and he had made a difference in the lives of two vulnerable individuals. The crowd, now united in their admiration for the guard and their sympathy for Thomas and Sarah, began to disperse, resuming their sightseeing and their daily routines. The bustling London scene slowly returned to normal, but the events that had just transpired had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed them. The atmosphere was subtly different, a little kinder, a little more aware, a little more compassionate. The ripples of the chilling glare were spreading outwards, touching the lives of countless individuals and reminding them of the power of empathy, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the unexpected ways in which even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity. Now, let's delve into Thomas's perspective to understand the emotional roller coaster he experienced during this brief but intense encounter. Before Richard's arrival, Thomas was brimming with excitement. He had eagerly anticipated this trip to London for months, devouring books and documentaries about British history and royalty. Buckingham Palace, in particular, held a special allure for him, a symbol of tradition, pageantry, and the enduring power of the monarchy. He had imagined himself standing before the palace gates, witnessing the changing of the guard, and feeling a connection to the centuries of history that had unfolded within those walls. He had pictured the scarlet uniforms, the bearskin hats, the precision movements, and the stirring music. He had dreamed of this moment, and he was determined to make the most of it. But Richard's outburst shattered his carefully constructed fantasy. The sudden eruption of anger, the demeaning language, and the dismissive gestures left him feeling confused, humiliated, and deeply ashamed. He didn't understand why this man was so angry with him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was simply trying to enjoy his visit, to fulfill a lifelong dream. Richard's words, like sharp shards of glass, pierced through his self-confidence and left him feeling vulnerable and exposed. He shrank back in his wheelchair, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the crowd, to escape the unwanted attention and the overwhelming sense of shame. He looked up at his mother, Sarah, his eyes pleading for reassurance and protection. He saw the anger and frustration in her face, but he also saw the unwavering love and support that had always been his constant companion. He knew that she would do everything in her power to protect him, but he also knew that she couldn't shield him from the pain of Richard's words. When Guardsman Baker intervened, Thomas felt a surge of relief and gratitude. The guard's presence, his unwavering gaze, and his silent condemnation of Richard's behavior offered a sense of protection and justice that Thomas desperately needed. He didn't understand the intricacies of protocol, but he instinctively knew that the guard had done something extraordinary, something that defied expectations and challenged the established order. In that moment, Guardsman Baker became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of arrogance and entitlement, there are still people who are willing to stand up for what is right. The guard's actions gave Thomas a sense of validation, a confirmation that his feelings were justified, and that he was not alone in his outrage. As the crowd rallied around him and his mother, offering words of comfort and support, Thomas began to feel a glimmer of hope. The fear and shame gradually subsided, replaced by a growing sense of resilience and a renewed determination to enjoy his trip to London. He realized that Richard's actions were not a reflection of him, but a reflection of Richard's own flaws and insecurities. The incident, though painful and unsettling, ultimately strengthened Thomas's resolve. It taught him a valuable lesson about the importance of standing up for himself, the power of empathy, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a lesson that he would carry with him for the rest of his life, a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, there is always hope for a brighter future. Now, let's shift our focus to Guardsman Samuel Baker, to explore the internal conflict that led him to break protocol and intervene in the unfolding drama. For years, Samuel had adhered strictly to the rules and regulations that governed his role as a royal guard. He had undergone rigorous training, mastering the art of maintaining a stoic facade, suppressing his emotions, and executing his duties with unwavering precision. He understood the importance of tradition, the need for discipline, and the significance of upholding the dignity of the monarchy. He had witnessed countless interactions between tourists and the public, observing the full spectrum of human behavior, from acts of kindness and compassion to displays of arrogance and entitlement. He had learned to remain detached, to observe without interfering, to maintain his composure in the face of both admiration and ridicule. But beneath the carefully constructed exterior, Samuel possessed a strong moral compass, a deep-seated sense of justice, and a profound respect for human dignity. He believed in treating everyone with courtesy and respect, regardless of their social status, their physical abilities, or their personal circumstances. He had a particular soft spot for children, admiring their innocence, their curiosity, and their unwavering optimism. As he stood at his post, observing Richard's verbal assault on Thomas and Sarah, Samuel felt a growing sense of unease. He recognized the injustice of the situation, the blatant abuse of power, and the profound impact that Richard's words were having on the young boy in the wheelchair. He wrestled with his conscience, torn between his duty to uphold protocol and his desire to intervene. That he knew that breaking ranks could have serious consequences, potentially jeopardizing his career and tarnishing the reputation of the Royal Guard. But he also knew that inaction would be a betrayal of his own values. A tacit endorsement of Richard's behavior, he thought of his own family, of his nieces and nephews, and of how he would feel if they were subjected to such treatment. He imagined himself in Thomas's place, feeling vulnerable, humiliated, and helpless. He knew that he couldn't stand by and watch as this injustice unfolded before his eyes. In that moment, Samuel made a decision that he chose to follow. His heart to act according to his own moral compass, to risk everything in order to stand up for what was right. He knew that he might face criticism, censure, or even dismissal, but he was willing to accept the consequences. His decision was not impulsive, but deliberate. It was the culmination of years of training, of countless observations, and of a deeply held belief in the importance of human dignity. It was a moment of profound significance, a testament to the power of individual conscience, and a reminder that even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity. The chilling glare, therefore, wasn't just an act of defiance. It was an act of compassion, an act of courage, and an act of profound moral significance. Let's now consider Richard Harding's perspective after his humiliating encounter. As he walked away from Buckingham Palace, swallowed up by the anonymity of the London crowd, Richard felt a complex mixture of emotions swirling within him. Shame, embarrassment, anger, and confusion all vied for dominance, creating a tumultuous inner landscape. Initially, his dominant emotion was anger. He was furious at himself for losing control, for allowing his temper to get the better of him, and for making such a public spectacle of himself. He resented the guard for intervening, for exposing his vulnerability, and for making him look foolish in front of so many people. He told himself that he had been justified in his anger, that Thomas and Sarah had been obstructing his path, and that he had simply been asserting his rights. But as he walked further away from the scene, the anger began to subside, replaced by a growing sense of shame and embarrassment. He realized that he had behaved badly, that he had acted in a way that was inconsistent with his self-image as a successful and respected businessman. He had allowed his entitlement to blind him to the needs and feelings of others, and he had publicly humiliated a vulnerable child and his mother. He replayed the scene in his mind, cringing at his own words and actions. He saw the fear in Thomas's eyes, the pain in Sarah's face, and the judgment in the eyes of the crowd. He realized that he had crossed a line, that he had violated a fundamental code of human decency. He wondered what people were saying about him, whether his reputation had been damaged, and whether his business prospects would be affected. He imagined the story being spread online, his name and image being vilified by strangers. He feared the potential consequences of his actions, the social ostracism, and the professional repercussions. He also began to question his own values and beliefs. He had always prided himself on his success, his wealth, and his power. He had believed that these things justified his sense of entitlement, that they gave him the right to demand respect and deference from others. But now, he began to wonder if he had been wrong all along. He wondered if true success was not measured by wealth and power, but by kindness, compassion, and the ability to empathize with others. He wondered if he had sacrificed his own humanity in the pursuit of material gain. As he reflected on his behavior, Richard felt a flicker of remorse. He realized that he had hurt Thomas and Sarah, that he had caused them pain and suffering. He wished that he could take back his words, that he could undo the damage that he had caused. He considered apologizing to them, but he hesitated. He didn't know how to find them, and he wasn't sure if they would even accept his apology. He feared that any attempt to make amends would only make the situation worse, that it would be seen as a self-serving attempt to salvage his reputation. In the end, Richard chose to do nothing. He suppressed his remorse, rationalized his behavior, and convinced himself that the incident was simply a minor blip in an otherwise successful life. He vowed to be more careful in the future, to avoid situations that could trigger his anger, and to protect his reputation at all costs. But despite his efforts to suppress his emotions, the memory of the chilling glare and the shame of his public humiliation would linger with him, a constant reminder of the day that he lost control and revealed the darker side of his nature. Whether this experience would ultimately lead to lasting change or simply reinforce his existing prejudices remained to be seen. Let's now turn our attention to the potential repercussions for Guardsman Samuel Baker. After resuming his post and maintaining his stoic facade, Samuel knew that his actions would not go unnoticed. That he had broken protocol, he had defied expectations, and he had drawn attention to himself in a way that was both unprecedented and potentially damaging that he anticipated a formal inquiry, a grilling by his superiors, and the possibility of disciplinary action. He knew that his career as a royal guard could be in jeopardy, that he could be demoted, reassigned, or even dismissed. He also knew that his actions could have wider implications, potentially affecting the reputation of the royal guard and undermining the traditions that he had sworn to uphold. Despite these concerns, Samuel remained resolute. He believed that he had done the right thing, that he had acted in accordance with his own moral compass, and that he had stood up for what was just. He was prepared to face the consequences, whatever they may be. As the hours passed, Samuel waited anxiously for the summons that he knew would eventually come. He tried to distract himself by focusing on his duties, maintaining his rigid stance, and observing the movements of the crowd. But his mind kept returning to the events of the afternoon, replaying the scene in his head, and wondering what the future held. Later that evening, after his shift had ended, Samuel was summoned to the office of his commanding officer, a stern and unyielding man named Colonel Davies. Samuel entered the office with trepidation. Bracing himself for the inevitable reprimand, Colonel Davies greeted him with a curt nod and motioned for him to sit down. He then proceeded to review the events of the afternoon, recounting the details of the incident with meticulous precision. He emphasized the importance of protocol, the need for discipline, and the potential damage that Samuel's actions could have caused. Samuel listened respectfully, offering no excuses and making no attempt to defend himself. He simply acknowledged his actions and waited for the colonel to deliver his verdict. After a long and uncomfortable silence, Colonel Davies leaned forward and fixed Samuel with a penetrating gaze. "Guardsman Baker," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "you have broken protocol. You have defied expectations, and you have drawn attention to yourself in a way that is both unprecedented and potentially damaging." Samuel braced himself for the worst, preparing to accept the consequences of his actions. But then, Colonel Davies paused, a flicker of something akin to admiration crossing his face. However, he continued, "You have also acted with courage, compassion, and a deep sense of justice. You have stood up for what is right, and you have protected a vulnerable child from harm." He paused again, allowing his words to sink in. The truth is, Guardsman Baker," Colonel Davies continued, his voice softening slightly, "your actions have brought something to this unit that we haven't seen in a long time. Genuine public support. Letters have been pouring in, praising your courage and your compassion. The story has gone viral online, and you've become something of a hero." Samuel was stunned. He had expected criticism, censure, and perhaps even dismissal, but he had never imagined that his actions would be met with such widespread approval. However, Colonel Davies added, his tone turning serious once again, "Protocol is protocol, and you did break it. I cannot simply ignore that fact." He paused, considering his words carefully. "Therefore," he concluded, "I am issuing you a formal reprimand. This reprimand will be placed on your record, and it will be taken into consideration for any future promotions or assignments." Samuel nodded, accepting the reprimand with a sense of relief. It was a small price to pay for having done the right thing. However, Colonel Davies continued, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, "I am also assigning you to a new role. Public Liaison Officer. In this role, you will be responsible for interacting with the public, answering their questions, and promoting a positive image of the Royal Guard." Samuel was surprised by this unexpected assignment. He had never considered himself to be a particularly charismatic or outgoing person, but he understood the importance of public relations, and he was willing to do whatever he could to serve the Royal Guard. "I believe," Colonel Davies said, "that you have the potential to be an excellent public liaison officer. You have a genuine empathy for others, a strong sense of justice, and a proven ability to connect with people from all walks of life." He stood up and extended his hand to Samuel. "Guardsman Baker," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I am proud to have you in my unit. You have shown me that even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity." Samuel shook Colonel Davies's hand, feeling a surge of gratitude and respect. He knew that he had been given a second chance, an opportunity to use his experience to make a positive difference in the world. As Samuel left Colonel Davies's office, he felt a sense of renewed purpose. He had broken protocol. He had risked his career, but he had emerged from the experience stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to serving his country and upholding the values that he believed in. The chilling glare had not only silenced a bully, it had also transformed the life of a royal guard, giving him a new sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to making the world a better place. Finally, let's consider the long-term impact of this event on Thomas's life. After the incident, Sarah was understandably concerned about Thomas's emotional well-being. She worried that Richard's words had left lasting scars, that they had damaged his self-confidence, and that they had soured his experience of London. She spent the rest of the day trying to reassure Thomas, reminding him of his strengths, his intelligence, and his resilience. She told him that Richard's behavior was a reflection of his own flaws, not of Thomas's worth. She encouraged him to focus on the positive aspects of their trip, to embrace the beauty and wonder of London, and to not let one bad experience define his entire journey. To Sarah's relief, Thomas proved to be remarkably resilient. He acknowledged that Richard's words had hurt him, but he refused to let them defeat him. He drew strength from the outpouring of support he had received from the crowd, from the kindness of strangers, and from the unwavering love of his mother. He also found inspiration in the actions of Guardsman Samuel Baker. He saw the guard as a symbol of courage, compassion, and the importance of standing up for what is right. He admired the guard's willingness to break protocol in order to protect a vulnerable child, and he vowed to emulate that same spirit in his own life. Over the next few days, Thomas continued to explore London, visiting museums, historical sites, and iconic landmarks. He immersed himself in the history and culture of the city, devouring every sight, sound, and experience. He discovered a newfound appreciation for the beauty of art, the power of storytelling, and the importance of human connection. He also began to advocate for greater accessibility for people with disabilities. He realized that his own experience had highlighted the challenges faced by those who are confined to wheelchairs, and he was determined to raise awareness and promote positive change. He wrote letters to politicians, advocating for improved accessibility in public spaces. He spoke to reporters, sharing his story and raising awareness of the issue. He even started a blog, documenting his experiences and offering advice to other people with disabilities. Thomas's actions inspired countless others, both with and without disabilities. He became a role model, a symbol of hope, and a testament to the power of the human spirit. He proved that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to overcome challenges, to achieve dreams, and to make a positive difference in the world. Years later, Thomas would look back on his trip to London as a defining moment in his life. He would remember the pain of Richard's words, but he would also remember the kindness of strangers, the courage of Guardsman Samuel Baker, and the resilience that he had discovered within himself. The chilling glare had not only silenced a bully, it had also transformed the life of a young boy, giving him a newfound sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to making the world a better place. The bustling London scene gradually returned to its usual rhythm. The tourists continued to snap photographs, the red double-decker buses rumbled past, and the black cabs weaved through the throng. The royal guards resumed their silent vigil, standing as stoic sentinels of tradition. But beneath the surface of normalcy, a subtle change had occurred. The incident had left an unspoken mark on everyone who had witnessed it, a lingering awareness of the potential for both cruelty and compassion that exists within the human heart. People were perhaps a little kinder, a little more patient, and a little more aware of their surroundings. They were more likely to offer assistance to those in need, to smile at strangers, and to engage in small acts of kindness. They were more conscious of the power of their words and actions, and more mindful of the impact that they could have on others. The incident had also sparked a wider conversation about disability rights, about the challenges faced by those who are confined to wheelchairs, and about the importance of creating a more inclusive and accessible society. Businesses began to improve their accessibility, installing ramps, widening doorways, and providing accessible restrooms. Public transportation agencies increased their efforts to make their services more accessible to people with disabilities, and individuals began to challenge their own prejudices and biases, recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. The story of Guardsman Samuel Baker and Thomas became a symbol of hope and inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to overcome challenges, to achieve dreams, and to make a positive difference in the world. The chilling glare had not only silenced a bully, it had also sparked a wave of empathy, compassion, and social change that would reverberate through London and beyond. At IT had transformed the city, making it a little kinder, a little more inclusive, and a little more aware of the needs and feelings of others. And so, as the sun set over Buckingham Palace, casting long shadows across the city, the bustling London scene continued its usual rhythm, but with a subtle difference. The incident had left an unspoken mark, a lingering reminder of the power of empathy, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the unexpected ways in which even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity. The stage was now set for the final reflection, a consideration of the story's overall message and its enduring significance in a world that is often marked by cruelty, indifference, and injustice. In a world often defined by division, indifference, and injustice, the story of the chilling glare serves as a potent reminder of the enduring power of empathy, the unwavering importance of standing up for what is right, and the unexpected ways in which even the most rigid institutions can be touched by humanity. It is a story that celebrates the courage of ordinary individuals who are willing to defy expectations, to challenge